All right, let me get on the horn right now with two buddies that I have known for quite some time. One since high school, one since he broke into the field of public policy. And I've had a chance to see them both grow into leaders that care about people for all the right reasons. I'm talking about Marc LeBlond and Myles Slade-Bowers, both of American Federation for Children. Happy holidays, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me on News Radio KDKA.
Lenny, thank you for the kind words. It's good to hear your voice.
Myles, do I got you there as well, sir?
Yeah, you got me here, sir. Thank you again for having us on.
No problem at all. Happy holidays to both of you. I'm going to start with Myles because, Myles, you're younger. I'm not going to say you're better looking because Marc will get mad, but I will say that you're younger, and we'll let the rest go from there. That said, sir, the primary reason why I'm going to you because you're younger is because you have gone through the whole education, school choice, the pivot in life experience much later in life or much later in our timeline than Marc or I have. Talk to us a little bit about how things have shifted as you've gone from a high school student that has been leveraging school choice and the need for these policies to expand opportunity to now being an advocate in the field.
Yeah, no, I'd love to shed some light on that. I love to, when I talk about my experience, I usually say that I came in just at the right time and under the right circumstances. I was a beneficiary of the tax credit scholarship program here in Pennsylvania, right as the movement was exploding on the federal scene. So I had gone from not even knowing what school choice was as a concept or even, the scholarships existing to receiving it myself, to it, for some reason, making national news. And it was quite a whirlwind for all of us. We were all right there together experiencing that at the same moment. And to see where we are now, where we have a full-fledged we have school choice breaking out all across the country and some fully universal programs. And we also have a federal tax credit scholarship program right now, which is insane to think about. Before it was just a concept, and here we're standing, and now we have access all across the nation, and no student is going to be withheld from the opportunity to find an education environment that actually meets their needs.
Marc, you have been riding along with Myles from high school student and talking to his mom, Jocelyn, about how can I find the best school for my kid, to going to the Trump White House right before COVID to have Myles sit beside other education leaders, and at the time, the former Speaker of the House of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Mike Turzai, who's from here in Western Pennsylvania, to talk about these solutions to the President and Vice President of the United States and the Secretary of Education at the time. As you've seen Myles's life be impacted by this at the state level and on the federal level, what are you seeing as a national leader in public policy when it comes to education? What has that arc been like from the public policy side over the last couple of years?
The arc, frankly, Lenny, has been incredible. And, just between us three on the phone, I mean, Myles is younger. He is better looking, but that's neither here nor there. To see that transcendence has been absolutely incredible. I mean, we're talking about somebody who was a kid in the Harrisburg area. His scholarship was in question. By the grace of God and thanks to good state policy, he ended up getting his education and joining the movement. And what you see some 5-6 years later is just incredible. We've got over 1 million American students participating in a private school choice program. So what I mean by that is some kind of a tax credit scholarship like we have in Pennsylvania, or a voucher program, scholarship program like we have in Ohio, or an education savings account program like exists in, Florida, Arizona, and a bunch of other places. But what is really exciting, in addition to, this explosion of state policy and school choice at the state level, is federal school choice. We now have a federal school choice tax credit that became law on July 4th, 2025. And so, quite literally every American will be able to, provided that governors opt in, will be able to have access to school choice. So finally some relief for, students in places like New York, places like California, places like Illinois, where they had a school choice program that the legislature revoked, maybe finally, Lord willing, we can finally get some relief for those kids and for those families.
Marc, tell me why. And look, you've been in the public policy aspect of this since 2018. I remember you coming into the field. We worked together, full disclosure, we worked together at Commonwealth Foundation. Myles Slade-Bowers was actually an intern, one of the few high school interns that ever worked at the foundation. We talked about this from growing the EITC, OSTC programs several years ago to where it is now. Why do you think this movement is exploding? And we'll get into the article that you both co-penned on Penn Live after the news break. But I want to talk about this for just a second, Marc, if I can. What do you think is behind the explosion of these policies in different states, including Pennsylvania, which we've had it for quite some time, but now Ohio and particularly West Virginia, which is not a state that people would think of as a school choice state per se, but now it is. Why the explosion over the last couple of years?
Well, Lenny, I'd be remiss to not talk about the COVID-19 pandemic if we're going to talk about this explosion, but it's really down to two things. One of them is, I guess, fundamental, and one of them is environmental. And that fundamental piece is that, having the benefit of choice, having the benefit of opportunities, right? We're talking about children having a meaningful chance to succeed in education. That's the constitutional obligation in Pennsylvania, is in theory, in spirit, every student should be guaranteed that meaningful opportunity to succeed. So choice, having options, school choice in particular, is very, very popular among families. I mean, we've done polling many, many different states nationwide, including Pennsylvania, 70% approval for school choice policies. But then you had 2020 rolled around, March of 2020, schools started to shut down. And then all of a sudden, parents got this sort of, under the hood look at education and the education system. And, sort of these problems that were very, very obvious to some, but that were under the surface for others. So I think you had parents broadly seeing, what some had been seeing for decades. And that really sparked this transcendence of policies being passed in state after state after state.
Myles, I got about 30 seconds before I go to the news break, but I want to ask you, how are students reacting to this movement? It's one thing to talk about parents. What do you hear from younger people that now see the possibility of going to different schools that match what they want to do with their lives?
Lenny, I think it matches a lot of what parents are feeling as well. And that's the really unique thing about this movement. You get this righteous indignation from households as a whole, saying what I've been given is not enough for what I want to achieve. And it's not what I've been promised. And I'm going to take the reins for myself, and I'm going to find my own solution, and I'm going to find a way. And that has been school choice. Young people are sick and tired of hearing, well, maybe we work harder, maybe, spend a little bit more time, maybe you wait 20 years and you might have a solution. They're looking for answers and solutions now, and they're not taking a pause or wait as a sufficient answer from politicians anymore. They're fed up, they're sick of it, and they're ready to get things going.
Listen, I'm talking to Myles Slade-Bowers. I'm talking to Marc LeBlond. I'm talking to you at 866-391-1020. After the break, I want to talk to them about specifically their joint op-ed on Penn Live, talking about where Pennsylvania is and where we are nationally when it comes to next steps for expanding educational equity for kids across America. It's Lenny McAllister. It's you and I. It's the news, but then we're coming back on News Radio, KDKA. All right, I'm talking to Marc LeBlond, he of American Federation for Children as a director of state advocacy. Also talking to Myles Slade-Bowers, he a government affairs fellow, also at AFC. Let's go to the article that you two co-penned, because it sounds less like a celebration, more like a warning system, a sounding of alarms, a ringing of a bell. And I'm going to go to you first, Myles, because it seems as though what you all wrote is basically saying in Penn Live, listen, the advantages and the great things that I got, other kids might not be able to get if we continue down this path with not empowering people with the right policies.
Yeah, Lenny, it's exactly that. I mean, right now in Pennsylvania, although we certainly do have access to school choice, it's limited in that. We still have over a 30,000 plus student waiting list to get on our program, and other states don't even have school choice yet. And it's a calling card not only to some of the leaders in the state, but as well as to other states. Parents and students and families are choosing school choice states. We're seeing public enrollment drop from states that don't have school choice options or have limited school choice options, and increase in states like Florida and Texas that are championing the school choice movement at the moment. And every state wants to be the cornerstone or at the best as they possibly can be and provide what their constitutional obligations are. Certainly, that's true here in Pennsylvania. Our governor is very adamant about ensuring that all schools have what they need and families have what they need to receive a quality education. And a part of that new ecosystem is school choice. It's not an if, it's more of a when. And if we continue to belay or deny the existence of these programs or the effects of these programs, you're going to lose population enrollment to other states that we're competitors with, including Ohio and others that have already started to take deeper and longer strides in the school choice movement.
Well, Marc, let me go to that, because it sounds as though we're losing to West Virginia and Ohio. And I know the history. I know that between the charter school law in Pennsylvania and the tax credit scholarship laws in Pennsylvania, it's been around a while for Pennsylvania. So explain to me the tone of the article that seems to indicate that Pennsylvania is now falling behind.
Sure thing, Lenny. Happy to. And I mean, you could look at a map of the United States and you could look at probably 15 states that are outpacing Pennsylvania in terms of, parental access to choice in education. But we don't have to look that far. I mean, you're out in Western Pennsylvania, just look out the window past the Ellicott line, and you've got Ohio right next door. Ohio offers every family that has a K through 12 child a voucher or a scholarship to attend a school of their choosing. West Virginia, also a border state of Pennsylvania, they have a universally available education savings account program, which means they can pay for, not only tuition, but they can pay for their uniforms, textbooks, tutoring, therapy, that sort of thing. And what's happening is not only are people moving from states without school choice to states with school choice, you see like California and New York losing enrollment, but it's also creating new markets. So in Florida, for instance, Florida has 600 private schools now that didn't exist 10 years ago. Because of these government programs, you have private markets that are opening up and creating even more opportunities, more options for students and families.
So I guess my question ends up going to you two right now is simply this, because I know what the skeptics are saying. They're saying, okay, Marc, you're talking about these scholarships paying for school uniforms and periphery types of educational expenses. Government shouldn't be involved in that. Taxpayers shouldn't be involved in that. But then, I understand the other side to that argument too, and there are people that would say, okay, well, should we be providing lunches? Should we be providing, daycare facilities or other types of things in schools or with school districts that are also periphery educational expenses? Talk to me a little bit about how people that advocate for these scholarships, as we see the expansion, how they deal with that. And Marc, I'm going to go to you first. What's the rationale to make the case for, hey, we have to help these kids, even if it means making sure that they have books and that jumper, because the school requires the girls to wear jumpers to school every day?
Sure. Happy to, Lenny. Look, we're all taxpayers, right? And, there's this, I'm not going to get into like the social compact or anything like that, but there's this sort of understanding, this agreement that, hey, education is a good thing and every child should be educated and should become, as an adult, a good citizen and able to be productive in society. So what are we getting for our tax dollars, and where are those going? Are those going to, some kind of a monolithic system, or should they go to students who are unique, who have individual needs, and give families some flexibility? And what we're seeing more is, the money going to states where, where they're offering some flexibility to parents, and parents being satisfied with that. And hey, look, in a state like Pennsylvania, what are we getting for our tax dollars? I mean, we're now, in terms of education spending, if you look at all of the sources, we're spending over $23,000 per student in K through 12 in Pennsylvania. That's seventh in the country. It's about $4,000 more than the national average. And if you look at the academic outcomes, we're certainly not in the top 10. We're closer to 20th. So I think we also have to think of this from hey, what's fair to students and parents? What's morally right in terms of offering them an education? But also, what's the best return on investment for taxpayers? And we're seeing it's better off in states that are offering opportunity and choice.
Myles, I know that you listed a number, both of you did. Roughly 70% of all of Americans agree with the expansion of these type of programs. But you're out there as a government affairs fellow, which means you're talking to constituencies that look different than the traditional school choice advocate. It's not necessarily in the conservative confines or conservative silos that people generally talk about these policies. What is it like to talk to people that are untraditional, non-traditional allies when it comes to school choice?
Lenny, it's a great question. Whether you're on the West Coast, the Midwest, or the Upper East Side, one thing that becomes infinitely clear amongst everyone who's interested or has curiosity about the concept of school choice is that the system itself is flawed. That we're getting something incorrect. And one model that we've all been able to agree on pretty universally is that when we start to fund families instead of systems first, we get a new layer of accountability. We have a lot of government systems that run a little bit unchecked, and there's tons of skepticism around school choice. But when you give families and parents the ability to determine for themselves what the best decision ought to be and not give it to a building first, everyone steps in line and say, we can figure this out. We get this new, like I said, that new layer of accountability, and we're extending the reach of communication around school choice's concept, and not just school choice, we're for private options. School choice is all options, public, charter, private, but giving the parents the power back. And that's the forefront of a lot of the conversations that I'm having on the ground, out in Arkansas, as far up as New Hampshire, oftentimes in Florida and Texas. Everyone is on the same page when it comes to we need to figure out, or we need to change how the model operates, and then we can start getting back to the table and discussing what's next on our list.
Marc, before I let you go, I want to talk about cost from two different angles. Marc, you first. And again, I'm talking to Marc LeBlond. He is Director of State Advocacy over at American Federation for Children. Marc, this sounds very expensive. This sounds like this adds cost to education. Is that true or false?
So typically what we're looking at, Lenny, is education is funded from three sources, federal, state, and local. The local being the property taxes that you pay to your school district. The types of programs that we're talking about, like an education savings account, a voucher program, they're typically funded out of the state portion only. So instead of, the state money, which let's say in Pennsylvania, that's about $8,000, right? And we don't have such a program currently, but we could in the future. The $8,000, instead of going to the school district, instead of going to the public system, those would just follow the child to the school of their choice. They could follow the student to a private school. We currently have something similar where money follows the student, from the district to a charter school if they choose to go to a charter school. So it's just the money simply going to a different place rather than more. And then we also have a different type of a system. So Pennsylvania has tax credit scholarships. In this case, the money is actually funded not out of public education funding at all. It's funded by donors, where they're just, instead of paying their state tax to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, they're paying their state tax to a private scholarship. So they're able to fund a student like Myles instead of paying Governor Shapiro.
But is it cheaper? Is it costing us more? Is it costing us less overall? If we're spending money on an ESA, is that money is it the same? Is it less? Is it more? Because I've heard people say that school choice costs, but then I've also seen numbers that say that, well, actually, if you're giving a scholarship for a kid that's going to a private school that's $7,000, you're not paying $17,000, $18,000, $19,000 in the public school.
Yeah, great question. I mean, so I mentioned earlier, $23,000 is the average public funding in Pennsylvania. The average private scholarship in Pennsylvania is about $2,500, $2,700. So you're talking really, fractions. You're talking pennies, nickels, or dimes on the dollar in the case of Pennsylvania. Now, there's going to be some variance nationwide, depending on the particular circumstances, how many students participate, which students participate. But by and large, these programs are money savers. There's a gentleman who works for Ed Choice named Dr. Marty Lucan. He's done extensive research on the fiscal effects of school choice, finding cumulatively billions of dollars in savings to taxpayers as a result of these programs, which are cheaper because the alternative models, they're doing education for less than the traditional public system.
Let me ask one final question. Myles, what's the cost, the life cost of having these programs in place versus just going with the status quo that we've been going with for the last several decades?
Lenny, I think that's a great question. You have to kind of point to history with that one. What's the cost to society when you lose a thought leader like Martin Luther King? What happens to society when you miss a pivotal president in tumultuous times? One student is not worth losing. So when we have these conversations, with families and with lawmakers, we stress the same, and we get some symmetry back and forth. It's not worth losing one mind. One great mind leads and changes and defines our societies too often for us to forego a generation of thinkers and send them out to the workforce and out into the world under-equipped, underprepared, and not able to really grasp all that they have. We have the finances, we have the motivation, and now we have the support to institute these programs nationwide. It's time to start stepping into what we believe that we are. America, we say so much about who we are and what we want to be. School choice helps us realize a lot of those goals. So to answer your question, there's not one student that is worth losing, and the cost is unimaginable if you lose just one great thought leader, just one great dentist, doctor, author, president. It's unimaginable.
Myles Slade-Bowers is a government affairs fellow at American Federation for Children. Marc LeBlond is the director of state advocacy, also at AFC. Both guys are guys that I have known for roughly a decade, that I've worked with. I've even testified in front of the State Education Committee with Mr. LeBlond. Happy holidays to both of you. Thank you for joining me here on News Radio KDKA.
Thank you, Lenny.
Thank you, Lenny. Thanks for having us.